Fine. Okay, let's start. So, hello everyone. Thanks a lot for joining this session. It's an important one. We will try to address what may be the greatest challenge of our generation, and it makes sense to try to address this using the greatest untapped resource of our planet, which is seaweed or macroalgae, or I think we should better call them sea forest, because if we do so, people will start to understand that we need to protect them and to grow them, and that it's more than weed. So a year ago, we were together for the General Assembly side session, introducing the manifesto, and we thought with this exercise that it was needed to tell more about the full potential for seaweed as a climate solution. Because there's a lot of people active in that direction. There's a lot of very, very inspiring projects, but they are all talking about their respect. I mean, their part of the project, and there's a great vision, and that's what we call that a vision statement, that is the various aspect and the various potential for seaweed to address a climate change. So in the run-up to COP26, it was very important for all of us to tell the world about it, and we really hope to announce it during the COP26, and we have an agenda. So with no further delay, I will ask the United Nations Special Envoy to the Ocean, which has been also President of the United Nations General Assembly for several years, who is a very, very strong advocate to the seaweed cause and to our seaweed manifesto from the very beginning. Very strong supporter, living in China. He knows what it is about seaweed. He knows a lot about seaweed. So I will ask a testimony from Peter Thompson to start with. So. We cannot hear that.
UN Global Compact on the launch. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, warm greetings to all present, and thank you for the privilege of addressing you. Congratulations to UN Global Compact on the launch of the Seaweed as a Nature-Based Climate Solution Vision Statement. UN Global Compact's Blue Road to COP26 has brought together over 100 stakeholders from business, policy, NGOs, and science to advance 4 ocean-based climate solutions relating to zero-emission maritime transport, offshore renewable energy, low-carbon blue food, and ocean nature-based solutions. The resulting briefs, with the recommendations for actions, are key information for policy and business leaders as we approach COP26 in Glasgow. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no way that we can keep to a 1.5 degree world without close cooperation between the public and private sectors. And we won't get there without the deployment of ocean-based climate solutions. The high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy's findings underline that ocean-based climate action can deliver up to a fifth of the annual greenhouse gas emission cuts needed by 2050 to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. It's in this vein that we have been setting up the cry for the climate finance needle to move decisively in the direction of the sustainable blue economy, away from the ridiculously low levels at which it has been pointing until now. Accordingly, we look for clear signs of a sea change at COP26 in Glasgow. Sustainable aquaculture is an essential part of the ocean economy's future. And within sustainable aquaculture, seaweed has star billing. Before I say anything more about seaweed, I make the point that food is fashion. Within my lifetime, I've observed huge changes in what people eat and drink. And I have no doubt my grandchildren will have very different diets than mine when they are my age, and that they will be consuming much more seaweed. I had not heard of nori, the Japanese dried seaweed that encases sushi rolls, or indeed sushi, until I went to live in Tokyo in the early 1980s. By the turn of the century, the whole world was suddenly eating sushi and lots of nori with it. A favorite food from my home in Fiji is nama, a crunchy sea grape, which is growing out there on the sea reefs. And I have no doubt that if the necessary international funds were provided to research and scale up production of nama through science-based sustainable aquaculture, that global cuisine would welcome it as a delicious, healthy addition to world nutrition. Ladies and gentlemen, UN Global Compact's vision statement underlines that seaweed is a highly promising nature-based solution, one that can play a significant role in both decarbonizing the economy and sequestering carbon from the surface of the ocean. Therefore, and alongside the other briefs developed by UN Global Compact's Blue Road to COP26, the Seaweed Vision Statement provides a clear opportunity for global leaders to harness ocean-based climate solutions. Countries looking to include more ocean-related, nature-based solutions into their nationally determined contributions, as indeed they should, have in this vision statement a ready-made tool. On the 23rd of September, the UN Food System Summit will be held in New York, at which aquatic foods, including the wonderful properties of seaweed, will be fully incorporated into deliberations on our future food systems. Likewise, at the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon, 27th June to 1st of July next year, I assure you that seaweed will play a prominent part in the solutions we seek for human security, health, and prosperity. Thanking you for your attention today, I commend the UN Global Compact's Seaweed Vision Statement to you all.
Thank you very much for this, and it's great to count on supporters like Peter. So we all really appreciate that, and he has been really helpful. Peter is from Fiji, so we stay in the same part of the world and move to Australia, where we have with the testimony from, and you will understand that these people were not able to be here live because I think it's about 3 o'clock in the morning for them. But the next speaker is Tim Flannery, who has really launched 10 or 15 years ago this concept, almost I would say, and was the first one to voice the potential of seaweed. There's a great TEDx from him about it. Tim is a mammalogist, a paleontologist, an environmentalist, a conservationist, an explorer, and a public scientist. He was named several times Australian of the Year back in the 2000s. He's also a great supporter to what we do, and he has discovered many animals, including 3 kangaroos. So how not to trust someone like that? So he really discovered 30 different mammal species. So anyway, a great enthusiast about the seaweed. I let the floor for a testimony from Tim Flannery.
I'm looking forward very much to being with you through the UN Global Compact to talk about seaweed as a potential solution for our climate problems. It's of course only one part of the solution. We need to cut the emissions from fossil fuels very hard and very fast. And we need to deal with all of the consequences of rising oceans and everything else. But in addition, we need to get some of the greenhouse gases out of the air, particularly if we hope to stabilise our the temperature rise at about 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial average. And we're talking here about very large scale drawdown of CO2 from the atmosphere. And there are really only a handful of measures that we can identify that give us that scale of drawdown. One of the most promising, in my view, is seaweed. And the reason it's promising is as follows. Seaweed grows very fast. It's not like a land-based plant that has to grow roots and a trunk and bark and all of these other non-productive parts. The whole of the seaweed is productive. So the fastest growing seaweeds can grow up to 60 centimetres a day. And that means, of course, they are capturing carbon from the atmosphere very fast as well. Secondly, the oceans are very large. The ocean surface covers 71% of the planet. And there's not as much competition on the ocean surface for space as there is on land. Third, the oceans offer us a great chance for sequestering carbon in the deep ocean. Now, over geological time, the primary repository for excess carbon has really been on the ocean floor. So we're talking here about really just giving nature a helping hand to draw more carbon out of the atmosphere and get it down into the sediments at the ocean bottom. There are several ways we can do this. At the most simple, we can simply protect our existing assets, whether they be mangroves or seagrass forests, or indeed kelp forests. And that's very essential to understand that. We need to protect those assets to draw down carbon. But if we want to draw down carbon at the gigaton scale, we are going to need to grow more seaweed. We're going to have to foster a seaweed industry. Now, some of that seaweed, of course, will be used for whatever purpose the grower decides to use it for, but some, inevitably, just as part of the growing process, will be lost into the deeper oceans. And if the seaweed farms are located at the head of submarine canyons, for example, or on plateaus where storms can wash the carbon of the seaweed down into the ocean depths, once that seaweed reaches a kilometre below the surface, it is basically locked away on human life scale terms forever, but certainly for centuries, millennia, if not millions of years. Now, it's important to understand one thing about the ocean. It's very, very big. It is 500 times larger than the atmosphere. And in fact, the ocean below 3,000 metres is the largest environment on Earth, the largest biome on Earth. If we took half of all of the CO2 in the atmosphere and transferred it to that deep oceans below 3,000 metres, we'd only increase CO2 concentrations in the deep ocean by 2%. So it's taking 50% from the atmosphere, put it in the deep ocean, you only increase it by 2%. Of course, any large-scale challenge like this, where we're doing things at the global scale, needs to be done cautiously, need to have good science behind us. But nevertheless, I think I can see a pathway through where we would have a flourishing seaweed industry producing many products that we need, including methane reduction products, and at the same time have the potential to sequester carbon at the scale required to help us stay within safe climatic bounds.
You're mute, Vincent. Okay, well, either way, we'll let you sort out your sound because I'm next. So that's fine. So
I'm back. Sorry.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, that's all working. So just wanted to introduce my partner in crime, and just wanted to thank a team which is so inspiring to all of us. And I think many of the projects that are starting right now are direct inspiration from his vision. And would like to introduce formally my partner in crime. She would be a seaweed. I'm sure you all agree that she would be a red seaweed. So with no further delay, Marta to explain. She's been the driving force behind this exercise. So it's her role to explain what it is. So Marta, you're.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm not sure how I feel about the red seaweed, but we'll take it. So firstly, thank you so much to Ambassador Peter Thompson and Professor Tim Flannery for these stage-setting remarks. What a tough act to follow for me is the red seaweed. But apart from red seaweed, my name is Martha. I'm a manager in the UN Global Compact Ocean team. And I want to thank all of you who are tuning in, joining us today, to mark the launch of our Seaweed as a nature-based solution for climate change vision statement. I have to say, we didn't make the name particularly catchy, Vincent. So I want to give you a brief overview of the statement, but not spend too long on it, because I really want the panelists to discuss it, but really tell you about the process and the steps here. So this all started back in January, whereby we at the United Nations Global Compact, so this is the part of the UN that works with the private sector, we sat down and discussed, how can we really advance policy and business climate action in the run-up to COP26? And, as we just heard from Professor Tim Flannery, global action is especially vital this year to really make ambitious goals to curb emissions. Now, while the ocean, as Ambassador Peter Thompson said, is often seen as a victim of climate change, it does host a wealth of solutions. So, against this backdrop of recognizing the role of the ocean and in combating climate change, we decided to launch what we called the Blue Road to COP26. So we launched this back in January, and the idea of the Blue Road, it had two concrete aims. So on the one hand, how can we drive ocean climate action from the business community? But on the other hand, how can we include and increase ocean climate measures in governments' nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement? So to kind of tackle this challenge, we invited over 100 stakeholders from policy, science, and the business community to take part, and we set up 4 working groups. And one of them was on seaweed as a nature-based climate solution. So the group met for the first time, I think it was back in March now, and we had around 40 stakeholders in the virtual Zoom room. And it really was sort of one of the first occasions where a number of initiatives were meeting for the first time, and a time to sort of connect and discuss what would be the most useful thing in the run-up to COP26 to best position seaweed. And we soon realized that the current landscape was a little bit fragmented with a lack of sort of coordinated storytelling around climate and seaweed. So building on the Seaweed Manifesto, we decided that what would be most useful in the run-up to COP26 would be to clearly and succinctly communicate how seaweed can and could be a nature-based climate solution. And we all agreed in the room or in the Zoom, that what was particularly important is that the statement also gave a very clear overview of the challenges ahead, and also outlining areas of needed future research. So by May 2021, so basically a few weeks ago, we had a rough outline of our vision statement, and thanks to all the contributions from 140 stakeholders, here we are today at launch. So if you could just go to the next slide, Mary-Kate, that would be great. I just want to give a very quick overview to what's in the statement, but obviously encouraging every one of you to take a look and read it yourselves. So we put forward 4 mitigation opportunities in which seaweed can help to decarbonize the economy and sequester carbon, and 3 ways in which these 4 opportunities can be activated. Importantly, because we wanted to present seaweed as a holistic nature-based climate solution, we highlight 3 additional co-benefits, so all around social resilience, positive ripple effects for coastal communities, but also importantly around enhancing ocean ecosystems resilience, and as has already been mentioned, building resilient food systems. And the statement also highlights some core challenges as well, which I'll briefly outline shortly. So if we could just go to the next slide, Mary-Kate, I just want to quickly show you all, mainly just because we're proud of this infographic, and big thanks to Systemic that helped us really communicate the story around this. So just to quickly explain, at the top, you'll see A, and this is presenting the opportunity around seaweed to accelerate decarbonisation by replacing and avoiding greenhouse gas emissions from seaweed-based products. That's right at the top there. And then on my right, you'll see a little clock. This is basically the scientific maturity where we got together and deemed, how mature is this potential solution? And I encourage you to read the statement to understand a little bit more of the rationale of why we deemed certain opportunities more mature than others. And towards the middle left, B, that refers to sediments, and so fragments of seaweed which detach during the growing period. Bottom left, which is C, that's carbon exports, so referring to fragments of seaweed detaching and being carried up by ocean currents. And then right at the bottom D, this is the opportunity of deep ocean sequestration. So once again, noting the maturity on each side for you to take a look at when you read the statement. And we outline 3 activation methods here. So these are the green numbers. So number 1, which is the top left, that's seaweed cultivation, which has also been mentioned by Professor Tim Flannery. The middle, which is 2, this is around restoration of natural seaweed forests. And then on the top right, this is around cultivating purely for carbon sequestration, usually offshore. So once again, please look at the statement for further information. We just go to the next slide, Mary-Kate. Just to outline some of the challenges which will be discussed, I'm sure, in detail in the panel, but really important to underline there's a strong need for further research to monitor ecosystem effects in the ocean. And secondly, there's a communication challenge, which we sort of hope this statement will help to rectify. So really communicating opportunities to policymakers so we can move forward. Thirdly, a lack of coordination, which once again, we're also hoping to support with. Fourthly, need to develop more monitoring, reporting and verification of carbon removal undertaken by seaweed. And fifthly, more enabling policy frameworks to let this happen. So if you just go to the last slide, really importantly, we want to continue the conversation. So we've set up a website, seaweedclimatesolution.com. We've mapped out already 18 initiatives who are already contributing towards this. So what's really important, we want to now begin coordinating on this website. So please submit your initiative, and if you haven't already, on the website. Please endorse the statement so that when we are in Glasgow, we have a number of supporters sort of backing this. And then, of course, even more importantly, continue collaboration with us by being part of the Ocean Stewardship Coalition at the UN Global Compact and by joining the Safe Seaweed Coalition. So I think that should give an overview, and I'll pass over to you, Vincent, to begin the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Martha. Thank you very much for this and for everything you did for that to happen, because really you were the driving force. Once again, please go and endorse this statement, the Envision statement, which is very important. Go on the website, download the report. It has been a great team exercise, and please endorse the statement. So I would like to move to the panel, no, to our panel for today. So we have 5 amazing people here to demonstrate their experience. I think I move to I will have one question for each of them, and then if you have question, you can use the question and the Q&A chat to ask them some question. I will first move because when we talk about seaweed as a climate solution, the first thing is really about science, research, experience, and making sure we do not disrupt an environment while trying to address a solution. So I think that's the most important point. I mean, Sir David King, you have been the chief scientific advisor for the UK government and head of the Government Office for Science for many years. You led the first discussion with COP at this time. So we'd like to have your point of view about how seaweed could be part of the solution, and what are the caveats and what are the research, the science to be made in order to really leverage on this solution. So Sir David King, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vincent. I think the first thing I want to say is that we, the citizens of this world, the humans, have not really understood even now, the role of ecosystems in our survival. We depend critically on all of our ecosystems, and yet that knowledge has disappeared in our economic manifestation, which has been amazingly successful. We have removed a lot of poverty in the world. We see growing middle classes today around the world. All of these things are very good, but in that process, we have been destroying our ecosystem. So that's my starting point. When we talk about the oceans, many of the oceans today are deserts by comparison with where they were before. If we're talking about seaweed, then I would point to, for example, the western coast of America, which was seaweed from top to bottom. Along that coastline. And that seaweed was removed by human beings because it was getting in the way of their other activities. That is a way of describing what has happened around the oceans of the world, overfishing. But in addition, and I think this was critically important, the business of catching whales to produce blubber, which we began 400 years ago. We are talking about the pre-fossil fuel era, when we were using whale blubber as an energy source. And in that process, we have reduced the whale population of the oceans by more than a factor of 100. It's more like 300 or 400 times less today than before. I say this critically because whales are a crucial part of the ocean ecosystem, and their diminished presence has also been a factor in the diminished presence of fish in the oceans as well. So when I look at the business of seaweed as a nature-based solution for climate change, I'm looking at seaweed as a means of reforesting the oceans, the coastal areas in particular. And in that process, the very reforesting, I think we need to see that we are going to improve the stock of biomass in the process as well, by which I mean fish and larger mammals as well. That stock will undoubtedly increase. As we look at the rest of the oceans, we need to go beyond seaweed, and I won't talk about that now. But I have set up a Centre for Climate Repair in Cambridge. And that word repair comes from the fact that we have been in a process of destruction over the last 300, 400 years. And now we have to not only think about recovery, we need to think about repair. And this does strike a chord with me, the phrase nature-based. The best possible way forward is nature-based solutions. And I think that, I mean, we call this whole area, including the addition of green matter in the deep oceans, marine biomass regeneration. Now, that marine biomass regeneration does produce massive advantages for human beings. But more importantly, a critically important aspect of our repairing our global climate. Thank you for your question, Vincent. Oh, I should also say, because I didn't quite answer your question, of course, we need science to check those statements that we've seen, for example, from Martha. I'm not questioning them, but we do need detailed scientific analysis to see where the carbon is going. How much of it goes back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide or into the ocean as carbon dioxide? We need much more detailed scientific analysis to back up all these statements.
And thank you very much, David. Thank you very much we will come back to you. That leads us directly to our second panelist, Megan, when we talk about how much is sequestered. I think your organization, Ocean 2050, has a lot cooking around this. So maybe you can explain us what you are doing. When will the first result be available? Because I think we are all very, very impatient about it. And what is the global vision also as part of the restorative potential for seaweed?
Thank you, Vincent. It's a pleasure to be here with my esteemed panelists. I'm here representing Oceans 2050's co-founders, Alexander Cousteau and Professor Carlos Duarte, who is leading the scientific work that Vincent just referred to. Oceans 2050 is a new initiative. We were launched last year with a goal of restoring abundance to the oceans in one human generation. So Sir David King's call to repair resonates very deeply with us, where it was born out of a collective frustration at what conservation and sustainability have wrought for the oceans in the last decades, and a belief that we know the science tells us the capacity of the ocean to regenerate, and it makes economic sense and is therefore really a moral imperative to deliver. Our work is underpinned by Professor Duarte's science, which is articulated in a piece in Nature magazine last year called Rebuilding Marine Life. And when we looked at opportunities to restore the oceans, we chose to start with seaweed farming because of our immense excitement about its potential to be restorative to both the climate and the oceans. I have learned a lot from my fellow panelist, Brad Ack, about the importance of reducing CO2 loads in the ocean, both for atmospheric concentrations as well as for ocean health. And seaweed farming is the only currently active, scalable activity to do that. And it's imperative on us that we scale it up more. It also offers important equity considerations because it is an industry largely run by women. It's accessible. Seaweed farming is accessible to coastal communities, rural and indigenous communities. I know some of us here in the West think we just discovered it. It's been practiced by some of our partners in Japan for hundreds of years. And so there's a lot, I think, that we can learn. And because it's a scalable activity, it's already a financially viable activity. We don't need to finance it just with carbon credits. In terms of Oceans 2050's work, we have launched the Seaweed Carbon Farming Project. The first piece of that is the science that Vincent referred to, which is a global study on 5 continents of the removal by macroalgae of carbon into sediment underneath seaweed farms. And we 100% concur with Sir King's comments about the need to better understand the carbon transport by seaweed. We are focused on the carbon sediment that happens underneath farms because that's what we can trace back to the farm source. We're pretty confident that our science will be very helpful to guide all of us collectively in understanding the drivers of carbon removal from seaweed farming. And we also agree that we need a lot more research into understanding the carbon that is exported from those farms, which may end up to 5,000 kilometers away. And Professor Duarte has found it in seagrass meadows and deep sea caverns. That scientific results will be published in a peer-reviewed paper in Q1 of next year. The principal investigators will be meeting actually just next month to discuss the initial results. Our sampling is almost complete. The analysis is well underway. We will also be publishing, for those who are listening and for whom it is of interest, a public access paper on our scientific protocols for sampling and analysis, so that any seaweed farm or any prospective seaweed farm that would like to do the same work and contribute to our collective knowledge can do so. And we have also submitted a draft concept paper to a carbon accrediting agency in the carbon market so that seaweed farmers can be able to monetize the carbon removal impact of their work. I would just say seaweed farming, the carbon removal aspects of it is entirely compatible with biomass use, as was explained by Tim Flannery, who is another source of great inspiration to us. And that makes it a really, really exciting solution for climate mitigation, as well as for climate adaptation, because it offers so many additional benefits. And I commend this statement. We've been really proud to be part of it. I'm sorry, I'm in New York. You can maybe hear the street cleaner behind me. And I'll finish, but I really wanted to say that for us, it's really valuable to be part of this statement group, the group that's bringing it to COP and to the policymakers in advance of COP, because I think it's critical that we have a consistent, thoughtful, easy to understand narrative about all of the different ways that seaweed farming can contribute to our global climate goals, as well as our biodiversity goals, which are incredibly important. We have an aspect of our study that's studying the biodiversity impact of seaweed farming as well. So we're thrilled to be part of this. Please, everyone, read the statement. It's the best articulation I have seen of the vast potential of seaweed farming to contribute to climate restoration, which is, I think, a mutual goal of all of ours. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Megan, and thanks for your support into this statement. So we will stay in New York, even if we will move to a different type of player. You mentioned that in Asia they have 100 years of experience with seaweed. We know also that Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, recently granted $100 million for improving social licensing in seaweed in North America. So Sharon from Alibaba, Sharon Guy, can you tell us more about, well, first of all, the vision that you have about all of this? I mean, I know that you have almost some personal experience with seaweed. There's a vision that you in China have about seaweed production for carbon sequestration, notably, or to displace some existing emission, which is a very, very important topic as well. And what is the global policy that Alibaba is willing to have? What is the vision from your company into that, which is very important as well?
Absolutely. Thank you, Vincent, and thank you for the question. It's definitely a pleasure for me to share with the group on some of our perspectives from China. Today, I'm joining everybody from New York, but usually I am based in China, specifically the city of Hangzhou, where Alibaba is headquartered. So seaweed for me, from a personal perspective, is very near and dear to my heart because I was born in a city called Dalian. It's a coastal city in Northeast China, and currently we're one of the world's largest producers of seaweed. And within my family, for not for generations, but within my family, we produce a specific product called wakame salad. Some of you might have eaten it before or heard of it before. It is growing in popularity in, for instance, the Whole Foods of the US, as I was just visiting a supermarket yesterday. So that type of Japanese food or seaweed product is gradually growing in popularity in the West. But for one, from a personal perspective, we are definitely meaning to grow that in popularity in more parts of the world. My full-time or daytime job is at Alibaba, specifically in Tmall. So Tmall, as you might or might not have heard, is China's largest B2C e-commerce platform. So as an equivalent, we are sort of similar to the Amazon of China. We are a bit larger than them, actually, in terms of the number of users that we have, and that's simply because of their sheer population of China. So we cover about 900 million monthly active users right now, and we're the second most used app in general in China. And because e-commerce penetration in China is very high, so it's about 45 to 50%. That means 1 in 2 retail transactions, so something that somebody is buying, is done online. And so what it means is that Alibaba is extremely vested from a retail perspective because we represent so many users and so many consumption choices. So our company also recently restructured our own ESG strategy because China as a country has restructured its own strategy for a net zero plan. So China right now has a dual carbon goal, and the country has pledged to reach peak emissions before the year 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. And as we all know, when the Chinese government wants a certain mandate to be enacted within the country, many companies within the country will follow, will involve that in their company strategy. So when we are looking at our own goals, we are definitely tying a lot of that into our business units, into our business decisions. From an insight that I can definitely share, because I used to work specifically within the food division of Tmall, is that there's a very interesting way that Chinese consumers buy products. And the concept is called live streaming. This is very unique to China, and it is a very different and interesting way that Chinese consumers will shop. In that they will watch someone demonstrate a product either by testing it or eating it or discussing it. And it's sort of done in a live fashion or a live show. It's very interactive. So there's a lot of interest from a consumer perspective and a lot of new types of products, new types of food trends are introduced in this way. And so Alibaba works with right now about a couple thousands of these, what we call key opinion leaders or KOLs in this space. And these are our pivotal influencers within this space to influence what people are using or eating and how they can be buying. So in our next phase, what I would predict, and definitely in conjunction with some of the panelists and maybe also people in this room today, is we would love to brainstorm with either brands in the seaweed space, whether you're a brand that's wishing to enter the Chinese market, or whether you are an entity that is looking to partner with Alibaba in this initiative. But we definitely want to be crafting and having what part of our business strategy more invested in not only being more carbon neutral, but also in this type of seaweed product or as one of the solutions that we see to bring us more into a carbon neutral age. So that is how much I will share for now. I'm definitely looking forward to connecting with everyone.
Thank you very much, Sharon. It was a pleasure to have you. I mean, Alibaba has demonstrated great enthusiasm over the last week to our projects related to seaweed. And I think it's very important to change and to nudge consumption, to change consumption patterns into something that is more climate neutral, as you say, and we are all the driver of this change. So it's very important to see what we can do for that and displace current emission and use a food that is the only one that can reverse climate change actually, and with a net zero emission or even a negative emission such as seaweed. So it's very important to talk about it and to change consumers' behavior. So now let's move to someone who is actually boots in the water, I should say, producing seaweed. There in Faroe Island, I was lucky enough to get there to visit his amazing farm a few weeks ago, one of the greatest in Europe, sequestering a lot of carbon, obviously, can harvest twice a year. So Olavur, a question is for you is how important it is in your business model and is in the vision of your company to to impact the climate change and to be recognized as such, and to get the ecosystem services funded somehow. And also a question about the second question, if you can, about the methane emissions and the capacity of some seaweed has to cut methane emission by large. We all know about the Asparagopsis taxiformis, which is impressingly efficient at this. And I had a great discussion yesterday with Sea Forest in Australia, who is very, very impressive about harvesting Asparagopsis. It's unlikely that Asparagopsis can be harvested in North Europe or in Faroe Island at least, but you have some other solution maybe you could share with us. So yeah, what's the vision of companies that is producing, and share us a bit more about the methane reduction potential.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Thank you for the invitation for being on this panel. Our vision of Ocean Rainforest is to produce 1 million tons of brown seaweed in 2030. So that gives you an indication of what kind of carbon we would like to remove from the ocean. And that is also the question: how much will we be able to remove if we are able to cultivate 1 million tons of fresh weight seaweed? There's definitely, and the other question that you're also asking, the ecosystem services, how much is that? And as Sir David King mentioned, I mean, we need more science in order to quantify these metrics. What are the impacts we do on the marine ecosystem when we are cultivating seaweed? And because I believe that we do a lot of benefits for the ecosystem, marine ecosystem, and the more we are able to quantify those benefits and also to valorize that, the more likely is it that we can really accelerate the speed on developing this industry. Because we are still at a fairly immature stage, even though, thank you very much about your nice words about our cultivation site in the Faroe Islands. But, you know, we are very small still, even though we have 100,000 meters of grow lines in the water. And we will double that this fall. By next year, we will perhaps produce something like 600 tons of fresh seaweed, which is, you know, pathetic almost compared to our vision for 2030. But this is the challenge that we have to start somewhere, and we have to grow, and we have to grow fast. We have a roadmap for how we as a company would like to grow fast. Taking up CO2 and the carbon credits market related to that are very important. However, I think it's also important to look at, okay, what do you want to use this biomass for? What are the market segments you want to sell into? And there for us, the food and feed market segments are definitely those who are easiest penetratable at this stage in terms of competitive prices and also volumes that we can supply. And as you were indicating in your questions, one of the things where we also can make an impact as a natural-based solution on climate change is if we, by fermentation of the seaweed, using no energy, but we can get a product with a functionality in cattle, ruminants, that can reduce methane emissions from cattle. We have seen that in using brown seaweeds that we can cultivate in large scale in the North Atlantic and in the Pacific. And ongoing trials are happening in Denmark. We have seen in vivo trials reducing up to 80% of methane when Saccharina lentissima is fermented and applied. We are going into in vitro trials now. We are going into in vivo trials now. We have been in vitro, and we are hoping that we will have other projects where we can pilot test it, because there might be other benefits related to productivity of the ruminants. Because the cow will, if it's a dairy cow, it will not have to use energy to produce methane. Instead, it can produce milk, for instance. So we will have an indirect impact on the protein production of the world as well. So there are lots of opportunities here. And on short term, I really hope that we can reduce methane, and in that way have not only an impact through taking up CO2, but also reducing CH4 and thereby factor 30, so to say, impact or in terms of CO2 with the seaweed we are producing. So that's some of the market opportunities we see. The challenge, and thank you very much for the vision paper that we definitely will support. But I think it's very important to highlight, nothing will happen unless we are allowed to put something into the ocean and start to grow seaweed. And that's where I see the largest barrier. It's not about all the wonderful things that seaweed can do. I think we all agree about that. But if we have to struggle for 2 or 3 years to get a permit to put 2 or 3 kilometers of lines into the water, this will not take off. So this is really a request. I don't know how to phrase it, but it's really important. It becomes easier to start cultivating and doing these good things for the marine ecosystem and for the planet.
Yeah, thank you very much, Olafur. And I think that was also part of the objective of this paper, to facilitate and to ease the social licensing and licensing from authorities, demonstrating the ecosystem services that Seaweed can provide. And that's really something that is very, very recurring about, please, I mean, especially in our part of the world, in US and Europe, is the licensing process. So that's very important topic. And if we confirm that also brown seaweed can cut methane emission, that will be a big game changer, because then we can really deliver at scale, and that would be a very, very good news, because methane emissions still represent 5% of the global emission today. So it's absolutely massive, and it equals emission from cars at the moment. So it's quite massive. So Brad, question to you. I mean, you led the CEO of Ocean Visions, and you have a long experience with WWF, trying to protect ocean ecosystem and develop a vision. So can you tell us a bit more about these two options: growing a seaweed and displace emission and sequester a very marginal part of it in the ocean, or should we think them all? And make sure that we do not disrupt the ocean floor in that case.
Yeah, thank you, Vincent, for hosting this, and thanks to the Global Compact for putting the Seaweed vision forward. I think having a vision that a number of people can come together around is critical in this space. It is clear that a fragmentation in the vision, which I think Martha alluded to, has hindered progress in this space, and really in every space that we need to be working in energetically to reverse the climate crisis. So I want to first start just by saying, I think one of the biggest challenges we face is that we're not acting like this is an emergency. We say it's an emergency. We have all of the data to show that it's an emergency. We see the change happening on an exponential scale year on year on year. And yet we continue to operate as we did a decade ago, which is incrementally. And incremental change in the face of exponential change is a losing equation. So we first, before anything else, we have to truly ask ourselves, is this an emergency that we're in? And if so, what are we going to do differently than what we have been doing? And I think what Oliver just discussed, taking 3 years to get a permit to put some seaweed into the water, is an exact example of how not to proceed. Let's just use the COVID crisis as an example here, right? We recognize that as a real emergency, and we operated in a way that we have not operated prior. We have scientific cooperation across all the countries in the world, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We worked with innovation around therapies, around protective equipment, around vaccines, and around treatments. And together, while we have not turned the corner on that crisis, we have demonstrated a new way to act. We need that new way in the space of oceans and climate. The climate crisis is literally killing the ocean through superheating of the ocean and through acidification. Changes in the ocean chemistry and heat content that we haven't seen for millions of years. So all of that is a backdrop for saying seaweed and other nature-based and possibly non-nature-based solutions need to be rapidly experimented with at greater scales with critical science and monitoring behind them to make sure that we're not doing something worse than the disease. And I want to emphasize that. When somebody has cancer, they will take extreme measures to get the cancer out of their body, such as chemotherapy, which is literally putting poison into your body in order to kill a worse disease. We have got a serious disease in the oceans, which is too much heat and too much acidity. And so anything that we do to try to arrest those problems has to be compared against the no action alternative. The no action alternative in this case is extreme pain for the ecosystems and for all of the humans that depend on it. So I just want to set that as being the framework from which we approach this, and for which we would argue that we need to really rapidly scale up global investment in confronting the climate crisis and changing the most critical numbers, the two most critical numbers, which are concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere and in the sea, and concentrations of methane, which has been reduced, which has been referred to as well. We should have those two numbers in front of us every day when we wake up, because they keep going up. They keep going up every minute, every second, every day. And until those numbers start going down, we're only going to see more pain and suffering on the planet and more of the destruction of the ecosystems that we care about. So with that, we are strongly supporting experimentation in a number of ocean-based pathways for CDR, carbon dioxide removal. Seaweed is at the top of that list. You can find out a lot more about the technology roadmaps that we've developed at the Ocean Vision's website, but we've worked with experts around the world to determine what are the most critical next steps to scale this industry. And they are social and political license. They are enabling governance. They are critical science and monitoring to answer unknowns about what happens. They are engineering, offshore engineering. How are you going to scale these kind of operations? We have a host of challenges in front of us, and we need to roll up our sleeves and get busy. Thank you for the vision. That's going to help a great deal.
Thank you very much to you, Brad, and I would strongly advise everyone to check your website, which is fantastically made as well, about the vision and clearly state. One question that is very much recurring is about the risk and what should be done to avoid chaos and havoc down in the ocean floor. So, and also there's a recurring question about the nutrients. If we sequester carbon, we will not only sequester carbon, but we will sequester nutrients down in the sediment. So, I mean, my question goes to David maybe first. How can we make sure that we do not create something that is even worse than the situation we are trying to address? You're muted, David.
Of course, your question is critically important. We shouldn't do anything unless we're quite sure that we are fixing it and not wrecking it. Yes, what we need to do, and the experiments are already being conducted in various laboratories. They've already been referred to. But what we need to do, of course, is measure the uptake over a long period of time and see what happens. But let's not forget that the ocean floor is also a feeding place for many of the ocean's fish and mammals. And so the whole point of this is that is recycling the material itself, the carbon containing material being recycled. I mean, there is a possibility as we restore it, that's what we plan to do, the ocean whale population to where it was 300 or 400 years ago. That sounds like a massive challenge, but we have to do it. Then we're going to find that the standing mass of the whales contains a vast amount of carbon, right? And so as whales die, again, they provide feedstock and nutrition through their own bodies to subsequent animals in the ocean. So it's a complicated question that we're trying to answer here, and we've got to take everything into account. But I'm just a little worried about people saying, well, that stuff that is falling to the bottom of the ocean is, first of all, not all getting there. Well, if it's being used as nutrition, that's fine. And then when it is down there, is it firmly sequestered? Well, if it's also eaten, that's fine too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, maybe Brad, a comment on this, and not only on the on this question, but there's a lot of controversy over during the building of this vision statement about not only the deliberate sinking of seaweed from an ethical point of view, because you are sinking food that could feed millions of people that are starving, and also from an environmental perspective, and see the nutrient robbing and so forth. So maybe a word about this.
Yeah, so first, we have to start from the shared understanding that carbon dioxide removal is an imperative. The IPCC has made it extremely clear that even to have a chance of getting to 1.5 requires massive CDR on the basis of 100 to 1,000 gigatons by the end of the century. If we want to actually restore the climate, we're going to have to double that number and obviously turn off the tap, which we're failing to do. So you have to get it from somewhere. There's no free lunch. Every single CDR pathway has a cost. The question to society is, which is the least cost? And that is going to require massive scientific endeavor, cooperation across many boundaries to answer that question. I can't answer that question for you. Sinking seaweed to the bottom of the ocean will have an ecological cost, it will have an economic cost, and it will have a social cost. Planting 1 trillion trees and converting half of them to bioenergy and building plants to make power will have an economic, a social, and a political cost. Which ones are the ones that we're going to invest in as society? But to not do it is not an option. Not an option.
That's clear. That's clear. So the whole question lies about how to do it. So Megan, thank you very much. You've been very active answering some questions. So maybe you can summarize your answer for those who are following the conversation line about who will issue this this protocol, and how will you activate this? What is the deadline and so forth?
Sure, happy to. The Oceans 2050, as I mentioned, with the scientific work is underway. So you can expect from us a peer-reviewed study in Q1 of next year. You can also expect us to submit a draft methodology using the verified carbon standard. We're working with Vera. As soon as possible after those scientific results are released, we're trying to be very efficient with our time, and we have actually already submitted the draft concept paper to Vera for that methodology. As soon as we're able to get it through that process, which is obviously not solely dependent on us, that methodology will be released and will be a public good. Earliest I expect that to happen would be end of Q2 of 2022. And Oceans 2050 will then be partnering with at least one and hopefully more of the farms that we are partnering with in our scientific study to issue credits to issue the first credits under that methodology and catalyze the market. Very important for us that the majority of the revenues from that go to the seaweed farmers who produced the carbon impact and not to intermediaries. So governance structure is going to be really important to us. It's also important to us that we demonstrate accessibility for different types of seaweed farms. So more artisanal ones, more industrial ones, in different parts of the world. I should say that depending on what the study says, and remember that we're only quantifying the seaweed that's removed into sediment underneath the farm, the carbon, not the carbon that is exported from the farm, which is likely to be more. That is because of ongoing monitoring, reporting, and verification constraints. So it may very well be that some of the farms in our study cannot provide the evidence of carbon removal sufficient to justify a carbon market transaction. That is fine. You need a range of results in any scientific study to better understand how this works, but we're confident that some will, and we'll be bringing that activity to market. I wanted just to mention, and also I should just want to be clear, the public access paper that I mentioned, we have not published yet either. We expect to publish that by the end of the year, and you can go onto our website, oceans2050.com, and sign up to be alerted of that when it's available. And just to mention briefly, I won't address seaweed sinking as it's a topic of much debate. Our vision for the future of Seaweed farming is to scale up the industry we already have today, which is predominantly run by women, very accessible, provides climate positive biomass for all sorts of purposes, including ones that Oliver knows better than any of us and has delivered on at Ocean Rainforest. And in terms of the other nutrients, there's a really interesting study that came out recently showing that China will be net neutral in phosphorus by 2026 because the seaweed farming activity is so extensive there and because of seaweed's immense ability to remove those nutrients from the oceans. I note, of course, the question of not wanting to have nutrient deserts. But in the United States, for example, in the Gulf of Mexico, we have the opposite problem. We have a dead zone the size of Texas that's produced by dumping chemical nitrogen and phosphorus into the Gulf of Mexico. So seaweed farming can actually help to reverse dead zones. And broadly, at Professor Duarte's research, which is Sir David King, I would say extends to whale carbon, an area of a lot of interest to us. I think he shares your vision, has also identified the potential of the ocean to host seaweed farms in excess of 1.5 million square kilometers of ocean, which is a massive scale up over the 2,000 square kilometers where we are today, relying solely on anthropogenic inputs of nitrogen and phosphorus. So that's just the excess stuff that we're already dumping into the ocean that's actually causing a problem. We can absorb with seaweed and support this industry going forward.
Thank you very much, Megan, for this statement. I mean, I cannot do more. I mean, I know that we are reaching the hour, but I see that Olavo wants to comment something, so I will leave you the floor, Olavo.
Very briefly, I think it's very important also, in order to see this taking off as an industry, we need to have pure economic drivers, also run by markets and investors. So relying on governments and philanthropists is not enough. So that's why I think it's also important. I think you have it in your vision statement, but it is important to look at what can we do within the next 5 to 10 years, producing biomass that can be used by industries. And, you know, there are rooms to reduce carbon emissions, but with that, for instance, producing packaging material, if we are also putting effort into developing the refinery process that are related to that. Finally, just want to mention, when it comes to the licensing, in Europe, we are talking about energy islands, for instance, in the North Sea, where we can use renewable energy, and you have offshore wind turbine parks and so on. This should also be coupled, and so we have the term multi-use. Really put emphasis on that, so we can also get seaweed cultivation into those areas, as well as the protected areas that you have mentioned in your paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and very, very good point. Yeah, so we are already overcoming the timing, so I deeply apologize to Sharon. We won't be able to accommodate any other comment, but I'm sure we'll see you again very soon in many of our events. So thank you very much to all of you. I would like to thank you also all the contributing partners. I mean, Climate Foundation and Sam, notably, and Brian have been very, very active building up this paper. There's many others. That's why we wanted to do a mapping. So please check the website. There's a great, great mapping of all the active players in that sector and who are doing what. Please ask us a question. There's the place where you can ask us a question or comment or anything you want on the website. You can send us questions. That's only the beginning. We are at the beginning of this journey, and as said by all these panelists today, it's the emergency is here. We have to act. Seaweed is here to support. It has always supported us in the most difficult crisis during our humanity has to face. So it will be here again, and all together we can make it happen. Thank you very much to all, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.